Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today is a very, very sad day. It's a sad day for me as a woman. It's a sad day for my two daughters. And I think it's a sad day for women across this state. We are sending a bill to the Senate, which is a total ban on abortions with few exceptions. Over the last 10 years that I've served here in the legislature, we've continued to erode women's rights. Until we can place ourselves in someone else's situation, we cannot truly make the decisions which we are legislating today. We all know the saying that before you pass judgment on someone, you need to walk a mile in their shoes, preferably one in heels. I've always wondered, when we talk about pregnancy in this chamber, we're so flippant about it, like it's a simple thing. We don't discuss what a tremendous undertaking, both physically and mentally, for the women it really is. It's a beautiful thing. I don't want you to misinterpret that, but it's not an easy thing. Pregnancies last 3 trimesters, which is about 40 weeks. And common symptoms, these are symptoms that I bet every single woman in here who has delivered a child has experienced, or your wives, or your sisters. These are routine common symptoms, and listen to them. Nausea, vomiting, swelling, varicose veins, backaches, hemorrhoids, heartburn, fatigue, constipation, mood swings, frequent urination, tender breast, bloating, cramping, changes in your complexion, in your skin, sleep loss, food aversions, nasal congestion, and even swollen feet. I mean, I believe that every woman in here has had most of these symptoms, if not all. And these are just the common ones. Pregnancy is hard, and delivery can even be harder and can be life-threatening. I had 2 very difficult, life-threatening deliveries. So when we discuss it as 9 months as quote-unquote inconvenience, or that once pregnant we should have no rights over our own bodies, it is at a minimum short-sighted, naive, and misinformed. And to be honest, really, it's insulting. As has been stated ad nauseum to deaf ears, these decisions should be decided between a woman and her doctor. A doctor has at least 12 years of educational and medical training in this area, and the doctor is in the best position to advise and counsel his or her patient. It's not the legislature. Since the Dobbs decision, when the U.S. Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade and 50 years of precedent, the overwhelming number of women in this state have been energized and galvanized to fight a total abortion ban, even one with exceptions. We are debating something here today that is not what the majority of South Carolinians want. The limited exceptions for rape and incest, which were added to the bill, still do not offer protection that women so desperately need. While this law provides an exception for rape and incest, it requires that an abortion be provided to a victim. It requires that in the event that abortion is provided to that victim, the assault be reported to law enforcement along with their name, contact information, ensuring the absolute destruction of a victim's privacy and self-determination in the wake of a violent assault. Victims and victims alone should be able to decide whether to report a rape to law enforcement. with all the collateral consequences that that entails, the additional trauma, disbelief, shaming, and brutal court cases. The exception as written does not provide anything close to an adequate response to survivors of rape and/or intimate partner violence. And guess what? The South Carolina House of Representatives is about to determine that a woman whose fetus may not be compatible with life has no choice to terminate her pregnancy at all. So what we're doing in this chamber is we're asking women to carry a baby only so they can bury that baby. The majority in this room have made this most personal decision for the women and families in this state. And as you know, we have limited data on the consequences and ramifications of the current law of the 6-week abortion ban bill, also referred to as many in this chamber as the fetal heartbeat bill, which provides similar exceptions to what we have passed here. And it's foolish to think that those consequences and ramifications that we're experiencing in just this 6-week period of time since the enactment or implementation of that law would not apply here. We tend to discuss and debate issues up here really in the abstract, but I wanted to present some real-life examples that were presented by medical experts. When I say medical experts, were presented by doctors who practice in this state, real-life examples. And these same experts testified at the Medical Affairs Committee in the Senate, but unfortunately, they were not able to testify before our ad hoc committee meeting. I think it's important that we, some in this chamber might know some of these examples if you serve on judiciary or the ad hoc, but a lot might not. This is from a physician here in this state. In this bill, we use terms like reasonable judgment, prudent, substantial physical impairment. Those are vague and don't carry straightforward medical interpretations. You are asking doctors, and this is from her or him, you are asking doctors to weigh incredibly complex medical information to determine the best treatment for the patient. And in many cases, they can't offer that treatment unless they place their own freedom and ability to practice at risk. Imagine yourself sitting across from your own doctor right now. Your doctor says, I have some bad news. Your condition is getting worse. It is possible that you could die from this condition over the next 9 months, but we can't be sure. So in this face of uncertainty, I cannot give you treatment. This next situation is a direct text from an OBGYN right here in South Carolina 1 week after the Dobbs decision. Her text states, we had an 18-year-old hemorrhage to death after an at-home abortion. Her family didn't know she was pregnant, found her passed out bleeding in the bathroom. Our OB team delivered a placenta with a severed umbilical cord while our team coded her. No one knows where the fetus is. When you hear that banning abortion doesn't stop abortion, it just stops safe abortion, this is what that means. She said she can't stop thinking about that 18-year-old whose life was lost and how she died alone in the bathroom of her home, scared and afraid. As a mother of an 18-year-old, this troubles me as well. This is a life lost because this girl, this 18-year-old, felt that we as a state valued the life of her fetus more than her. No matter who the girl's parents were or what they believed, I'm confident that if you go back in time and they could have their daughter back, even if it meant obtaining an abortion for her, they would do it without hesitation. Another consequence, criminalizing physicians is dangerous for patients, and it will discourage doctors from practicing in this state. We already have a shortage of OBGYNs. There are numerous counties in this state without one practicing OBGYN. It also creates significant mistrust by women. Women are fearful to go to their doctor. They're fearful to discuss their menstrual history because it will be shared due to fear of tracking. And women are not seeking care out of fear. And that's not what we want here. I know every one of you, and I know we all have good intentions, and we come from different backgrounds. And that's kind of what I'm saying, is you got to put yourself in someone else's shoes. We're making these decisions when we're really not qualified to be making these decisions. We're succumbing to national influence and pressure, I feel. And I hope these examples that I've discussed show why this terrible bill is bad policy for South Carolina. It's not the best interest of families in this state. It's making criminals out of physicians, and it's not what the people in this state want. And as I said earlier, today is really, really a sad day for women of South Carolina. And I believe from the bottom of my heart, it's a sad day for our state and for our country as a whole. And I thank you for the time that you've allowed me to express my dissatisfaction with the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker and members, I'm not intending to stand here very long, but thought it important that an additional voice be added to the one that you've already heard. And I've heard previous speakers talk about more giggles. You know who's not giggling? A rape victim who is being forced to bear a child. Mr. Speaker and members, let me just be real clear. Heard people talk about more kids, more children. What I'd like to remind you of is the economic impact to women who have children that they don't want to have, the economic impact which suggests that women who are forced to have children who are already living in poverty, what we're doing, quite frankly, is creating or continuing the cycle of poverty. I heard one of our colleagues say, we're not done yet. And what I would remind voters out there of is that it sounded eerily similar to Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, who said, there is more work to do. Clarence Thomas, who named every decision that the Supreme Court has made that he would like to revisit, other than Loving v. Virginia. And it may be just a coincidence, Mr. Hart, that Loving v. Virginia has to do with interracial marriage. I think it's interesting that Supreme Court Justice Thomas wants to revisit every decision the court has made in the last 50 years, which grants rights to Americans, but he doesn't want to revisit that one. Go figure, as they say. Mr. Speaker, I hope your conversation with your caucus about decorum and civility and all of that applies to whatever voices I just heard over in the corner. I'm sure that was just a momentary lapse. My message is not to anybody sitting in this chair, in these chairs, because the die is cast. The decision has been made. My message is to those people outside of this chamber who may be watching online, who may be outside in the balcony or up, you know what I'm trying to say. I hadn't intended to come up here and say anything because, again, I know that the decision has been made. But those of you who know me know that there was no way after yesterday, and I would encourage anybody else who wants to be heard to do so. But there's no way I could not take this podium and echo Representative Bernstein's comments. You're messing in things that you have absolutely no business messing in. And I, of course, could not resist the urge. Mr. Burns is not back there. But to talk about the hypocrisy of my colleagues in here, and some of you were not here when we had those conversations about mask mandates. Find it interesting, Mr. Jones, that the author of the mask mandate and telling people what they can and cannot wear when it came to that somehow doesn't seem to apply when we talk about women being in control of their bodies. I said to the group yesterday, row, row, row your vote. I repeat that for those who are interested. Now, I'm not stuck on stupid. I understand all the maneuvering, and let me pause just for a moment to say thank you to my Democratic colleagues for their work yesterday. What I am hopeful, Mr. Gilliard, it shows is what can happen when you have a plan, you execute that plan, you let go of whose idea it was and who's going to get credit and all of that. But you recognize the power of collective action. And yes, there are always going to be one or two who will go a different direction. But guess what, y'all? That's why we're Democrats, because we allow that. We allow you to make up your own mind. We allow you to take positions that your caucus may not like. We allow you to be the independent voice that your constituents sent you up here to be. My message to my Democratic colleagues, if I am reelected, because I do have opposition as well, and I take it very seriously because you know there are a lot of uninformed, or shall we say misinformed voters in this state. And so I'm not taking it for granted. I think all we need to do is look around at some of the empty seats in this chamber. All we need to do is look around at some of the seats that are not empty, but will be empty by that person to understand that on any given election day, whether fairly or not, people can lose. I want you to know that for me, it's okay if I lose, because guess what? The sun will come up the next morning, whether I'm in here or not. And I think if some of us had that attitude, that life goes on. I don't know, maybe some of y'all didn't have a life before you got in here. I did. I got one now, and I'm interesting, you know, I like this and all of that, but I'll be all right if I don't come back. And some of y'all say, Lord, please don't let her come back, please. But in all seriousness, I am so hopeful that the voters will tell you what they think of what you're doing on November 8th and in the 2 weeks before that. Interestingly enough, for a group of people who always talk about what the voters of South Carolina want, Representative Crystal Matthews came up here yesterday and offered up an amendment which would have allowed the voters of South Carolina to speak on this issue. I find it very interesting that some of us in here apparently don't want to know what the voters really think. Could it be that we are so intent on our version of what the voters think? You know, it's kind of like nowadays, don't confuse me with facts. There are so many people, it is so interesting to me how misinformation, knowledge, how ignorance and lack of knowledge is ruling the day. How do we think we will continue to maintain what we think is American excellence when we are not interested in science or education, history, or anything like that? And so I say to the voters of this state, when they talk to you about what the voters want, how about asking them how they voted on this amendment that Representative Matthews put up that would have allowed them to speak? I just am so curious as to how we want voters to vote about whether the flag should stay up or come down. We want voters to vote about whether we should have open or closed primaries. Did Kansas scare y'all that much? I'm thinking maybe so. And for those of you who only watch Fox News and QAnon and all of that, what I'm talking about when I say, did Kansas scare y'all that much, is that in Kansas, ruby red Kansas, the voters in Kansas decided, yes, we believe in God. Yes, we believe in the flag. We believe in America and all of that. But guess what else we believe in? We believe that women have the right to make choices about their reproductive freedom. The voters, conservative voters in Kansas, said that. And I'm not sure if maybe we are afraid that all of these years of us coming here, standing at this podium, talking about what the people of South Carolina want, I think some of us scared to really find out, Mr. Clymer, what the people of South Carolina want. And so with all due respect to my 123 other colleagues in here, to the voters of South Carolina, if you want to see a different reaction on the issue of choice, you're going to have to change the faces of the men and women who sit in here and across the hall. Now, guess what people are thinking? How dare she get up there and tell people to vote against me? Y'all, these seats don't belong to us. They belong to the people. And they have a right to change at any point they want to. And guess what else? At the time, Mr. Simrel, about 38,000 voters in House District then 66 say, you know what? I don't always agree with that lady. Sometimes she talk too much. Sometimes she be stepping on toes. Sometimes she just be making me mad. But you know what? I think I'll send her back, because one of the things that she does do is listen to her constituents. One of the things that she does do is, when she has additional information, recognize that it's okay to change your mind. You don't have to get locked in. I've often wondered why politicians are so afraid of admitting that they change their mind on an issue. Anytime. It's about learning, y'all. I'm a believer in lifelong learning. And anytime you get new information or you see a different perspective, wouldn't the right thing to do be to change your mind? I don't know, maybe it's just me. But I appreciate your attention. I appreciate the opportunity to speak on this. You know, the other thing that scared me about we're not done yet is I've been here 31 years, and I declare, I thought everything, Mr. Newton, that could be done on the issue of abortion had been done. But y'all keep surprising me and amazing me with all of the restrictions that you come up with. And I really, really want to impress upon you, especially, particularly, those of you from urban areas, y'all remember this. There aren't OB-GYNs in South Carolina, in rural South Carolina. So when you're having these women carry a baby to term, who's going to take care of it? Oh, all of the pro-life people take great pride in the fact, Mr. Herb Kirschman, that we have given millions to pregnancy crisis centers or whatever the name is. I'm so glad that those programs are there to provide diapers and formula and some of the things that babies need. But you know what else I wish was there? That kind of support when they get out of diapers. That kind of support, Mr. Hyatt, when they start school. That kind of support when the mom who has been forced to have them has no job, no income, not knowing where the next meal is going to come from. I wish we had that kind of passion that I've seen up here for the unborn. I wish that extended to those who you're forcing to come into this world. I'd like you, Reverend Rivers, to have that passion for a safety net and a support net so that these kids who are here, not because they wanted to come, but because some politician forced them to come, it would be great if in the state of South Carolina, for example, we funded public, emphasis on public education in a way that these kids wouldn't grow up continuing the cycle of poverty. It'd be great if our support system was such that children didn't have to worry about where the next meal comes from. So y'all take the victory lap on this, as you've taken the victory lap on funding religious private schools. But you know, I'm kind of with those who say, you know what? If y'all ain't gonna recognize, and when I say y'all, I'm not just talking about us, I'm talking nationally now, guys. If y'all aren't gonna recognize, you're always talking about the Constitution, the Constitution. I think the Constitution somewhere talks about separation of church and state. But since y'all don't want to recognize, now, I'm not a lawyer, not a constitutional scholar. I don't even play one on TV anymore. It's too many of them. But here's the point. No offense to the lawyers in the room. But if you are of the opinion, I won't go down that road. Mr. Speaker, thank you so much for this. I think, like my grandmama say, I'm beginning to kind of tear the rag off the bush. Some of y'all know what that means and some of you don't. But I appreciate the opportunity to come and stand before you. Voters out there, I like all of these people in here, don't have a thing against them. Listen, this is not personal. This is business. And too many of you have made your choice at the polls personal. You have voted for people because you go to church with them. You like them and they're nice people. You golf with them, you play bridge, you do all of those kinds of social interactions. What I want you to start asking voters is the question that was asked by one who probably would be considered a rhino now with this current crowd, and that's the former President Ronald Reagan. The question that he asked, are you better off now than you were before? And so I say to the women in this state especially, and to the men who support women having the intelligence to make responsible choices about what they do with their body, I say to them, the question you need to start asking your church members who are in here, your friends who are in here, is how they have voted, and if they're running, how they will vote on issues that affect your well-being. And at some point in this country, when we have voters who stop falling for the red meat that is way before them, the distractions that keep you off of what is really going on, then you will make better choices at the polling booth. And for those of you who are harboring what you're going to do to me in the event that I do get elected and come back, bring your A game. Because guess what? There have been many who have come before you and have sat right in some of these same seats, right, Mr. Valentine? And had all kinds of plans about what they were going to do to Cobb-Hunter. I won't tell you where some of those people are now, but it don't matter to me. Like I said, this is not my life. I had a life before I came here. I'm going to have one when I leave. Thank you so much for your attention and your patience. And voters, row, row, row your vote. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, members.
Thank you, Ms. Cobb-Hunter.
You're welcome.